Well, it was sure a mind-boggling 15 minutes. It was a first encounter between the two leaders of South Korea and North Korea meeting for the first time, and it's a third summit between the two Koreas, and the first in 11 years. Now, there was a lot of handshakes, a lot of photos. What did you make of the encounter of the two leaders?
This is something we can expect because the first time they see each other face to face, a handshake, good handshakes, and then around the handshakes. But I was a little bit surprised because I was expecting a little bit more kind of, hugging.
Skinship.
But this is something they can done during the dinner or something. So as a first sign, good handshakes and photo ops and the naming in the visitor's book, for example. And this is a good start. And they look very much kind of relaxed, happy. Right? And honor guard, they playing the traditional Korean song of Arirang, which is highly symbolic of our nation and also our national identity and unification. So this is a really good start, and I think I really hope that the things will go as smoothly as we expect it to be.
Professor Langkov, what did you make of the meet and greet? You were expecting more skinship, maybe a hug between the two leaders.
Frankly, I would agree with Professor Kim. Honestly, I expected a hug. But two handshakes, well, maybe it counts for one hug. Let's consider it. Let's see what's going to happen. Well, and looks like that, well, first meeting, everything is going according to the plans. Everybody is smiling, people are probably a bit tense, but you don't see it. And it's indeed quite important because stakes for both are very high.
So now the two leaders are now in the Peace House, and official summit talks will kick off at 10:30, so in about 40 minutes from now. What are some of the things that we should be looking out for today? It's a long day. What should we have our focus on?
I really don't know because all the information about this protocol and the time, every each point of time was actually known by the public because we have a very good knowledge and they have a very good communication schemes. And this has been done by the Chongwade, for example, like we have a secretary for public communications rather. And they've been very much detailed in briefing about what's really going on point by point. And so I think people are pretty much knowledgeable about what's really happening maybe 2 minutes from now. So I think this is really good because people are really getting all the information necessary for this very historic moment. We are really ubiquitous with all the information available to us. South Korea is a very highly sophisticated technology society, information society, and all this information is not just with a broadcast live, but also they get all the information through their SNS or internet. So they have all kind of additional means of getting information about this particular event today.
So what is the significance of this being broadcast live? Like, North Korean leader hasn't been friendly of being in front of the camera a lot, but from the historic meetings from back to Pyeongchang Winter Olympics when the North Korean delegation came to Korea, they've become more open. We've heard his voice on camera as well. What are you making of this?
Talking about Kim Jong-un, Chairman Kim Jong-un, he was known to be sort of reclusive, but it does not mean that he necessarily feels uncomfortable in front of people, because there have been foreigners and obviously Koreans with whom he has interacted, and everybody who has encountered him says that he is quite relaxed, charming, really good in conversation, so it's not very surprising. And the fact that, well, it's broadcast, it's of course a part of symbolism to show the human face of North Korea, or what is supposed to be a human face of North Korea. So in this case, it's a face of Kim Jong-un, and it's just another way of further emphasize that now we are getting into a new era, everything will be fine.
So there are three agendas for this summit: denuclearization, setting peace on the peninsula, and bettering inter-Korean ties. what do you think will be brought onto the table in the first half of the summit?
Definitely, number one priority is denuclearization of North Korean WMDs. I think I don't know how long it'll take for the two leaders to agree on a basic framework of this meeting, but it's the number one priority, and they know which should come first, denuclearization, because this will be a very important condition for a successful meeting with Mr. Trump later on. So they're going to spend a lot of time on how they're going to define and bring special conditions to the kind of long process of denuclearization rather than on one spot, because it will be impossible. This is just symbolic agreement that North Korea will take the lead, take the path to the eventual denuclearization of the North Korean WMDs. But also, this more on our side is economic exchange and also cultural events. And also because we're going to have another Liberation Day coming in August, for example. So they are maybe working on how going to hold the second summit meeting, or quite possibly in Pyongyang. So they may be talking about kind of potential future for these two leaders, beginning with the denuclearization, economic exchange, and also cultural exchange. And another very important thing for the Korean people is getting the family reunion with among the dispersed families. So this will definitely top their agenda. But I think they're going to allocate much of the time on the first topic on their agenda, which is denuclearization, even though Mr. Kim will not like them much, because when it comes to detail, it is almost impossible to come into any specific terms and conditions. But the very basic rough idea that we are really willing to, and I have the firm, Mr. Kim, firm reserve to finally give up and abandon these kind of WMDs in return for some concessions from the South Korea and also the United States and the international community as a whole.
So we have touched upon this topic in our earlier discussions, but we don't know to what extent that they will come to an agreement on denuclearization. At this point in time, what sort of agreement, to what level do you think is feasible?
As I have said, a serious discussion on denuclearization is simply impossible, because this is not so much an issue of South Korea, but rather the issue of the United States. And the South Korean government simply has no authority to negotiate many of the relevant issues. So I would expect some kind of oral commitment, maybe written commitment to denuclearization at most. That is, the North Korean representative, that is Chairman Kim, will say that North Korea is committed to the eventual denuclearization if and when the situation is acceptable, when necessary guarantees are given. Not much more can be done on this issue. And same about economy. They can basically discuss some basics of the future economic cooperation, but as long as they are facing the UN Security Council sanctions, not much can be done in practice. So major emphasis I would expect on symbolism, on humanitarian activities, including divided families. Maybe we keep sort of overlooking. There are highly likely to be some pronouncement about the end of the state of war, which is the first step towards building a peace system on the Korean Peninsula. It's also likely to happen. And a great deal of stuff about humanitarian and cultural exchanges.
Yep, so we have said if a declaration is made to end war, maybe achieving a peace treaty is too early at this point.
That's right.
But for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to directly mention that he is willing to take steps towards denuclearization would also be a progress, because so far we've only heard it indirectly through reports or through his aides. How do you see this?
That's right. Speaking of the end of the war is one thing, but actually realizing that is another, because it takes a whole process doing other measures to do that. So probably there was a lot of kind of speculation and also reservation in South Korean, particularly conservative in the South Koreans, that he should not agree on the statement that this is the end of the war. No, it's just maybe instead, Cheong-won made it very clear, President Moon Jae-in will talk about the new year of a peace on the peninsula rather than the end of the Korean War, because this will discuss between not just North and South Korea, but the United States and also China. So this is something I understand has been deferred to another meeting between Washington and Pyongyang later on. Rather than so, instead of the end of the war, it sounds great, but kind of new beginning of another peace on the Korean Peninsula. That's quite more probably likely between the two leaders, I guess.
So South Korean President Moon Jae-in has also stressed that obviously in that kind of aspect, there needs to be a common agreement between the key players in the region. So do you see this summit between President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un being the start of many more summits between North Korea to come?
Yes, definitely. Because in order to get any kind of, I wouldn't say reconciliation, I don't want to sound too sweet, stability, maybe not forever, but for a few years to come, you need active involvement of at least China, preferably Russia, perhaps Japan. And I'm not even mentioning three major players, North and South Korea and the United States. So some kind of multilateral talks or maybe summit meetings, some other meetings are likely to follow this meeting and the next, hopefully next, meeting between Kim and Trump. So, well, it's going to be quite a lot of talks for the next few months.
Yes, so we do have a North Korea-U.S. summit in the works, and there's also speculation that North Korean leader may be meeting with other regional leaders in Northeast Asia. Do you see this, the summit reaching an agreement to hold inter-Korean talks more regularly? You did mention earlier, because it's being held on the South Korean side now, there could be another one by August with Liberation Day on the North Korean side.
We are not 100% sure, but we are just hoping that this historic moment will lead to another summit meeting in Pyongyang. But there might be something that might happen, something in between. So that's why we need to more talk at the high level and also working level. So this is, if given we have all these kind of another meetings between the working level and high level officials, then it will kind of secure another kind of summit, possibly in Pyongyang. But otherwise, there might be something intervening in between the two periods. That's why we have to be very careful. So each and every single kind of summit meeting between Trump and Mr. Kim, and also Moon Jae-in is supposed to meet Mr. Putin, I understand, during the Russian, FIFA World Cup. So there is a lot of opportunities for the leaders in this region to talk to each other and discuss about the important issues. After all this Korean War has actually started not just by South Korea and North Korea. It is all kind of proxy war between the former Soviet Union and the United States at the time. So all these four kind of the power should be involved, and they have stakeholders to this important meeting. So it's quite natural for all the leaders to want to be invited and engaged in this long process, because there's a full restoration of the state previous to the war, 65 years ago. So it'll take many more summits. So I should call this is a summit talk diplomacy rather than just summit talk, because there'll be around the summit talk another one, another that. Not to mention the high level and also working level talks. So it's a very busy months coming ahead.
Yep. So because the North Korean issue is related to most security interest of regional players, so everybody will want to get involved. But people have said that denuclearization itself needs to be dealt with North Korea and the U.S. because it's a matter that they should settle. And many have said that South Korean talks, the inter-Korean talks taking place today, would be a prelude for these talks. What role should South Korea be playing between now and the U.S.-North Korea summit?
First of all, South Korea should push United States towards accepting a compromise, because I'm not still absolutely certain whether the future summit between North Korean and American leader, whether it's going to work well. There is always a probability, a possibility, that at the last moment President Trump will listen to some of his advisors who will tell him that nothing but full, immediate denuclearization is acceptable. And as a result, the summit might not happen or might end a disaster. So it's very important for the South Koreans to keep some pressure on the United States, explaining that yes, negotiations are necessary, and no, military operation is not an option. It's major role. And of course, it's probably will be the start of some exchanges with North Korea, just to explain, just to prepare playgrounds for future economic and cultural and humanitarian exchanges.
So you've said that, but in terms of denuclearization, the way North Korea perceives this term and what the U.S. wants is very different. Do you see the two sides making some sort of consensus, reaching an agreement?
I don't think they have agreed any consensus how they're going to proceed with this kind of denuclearization process, because it'll take a long time and you need your confidence and trust on both sides, because unless you have a trust about each other's side, it's very difficult to proceed with this kind of inspection processes. So one of the ideas we kind of circulating, the South Korean military experts might join the IAT inspection team in North Korea if they are allowed to come to North Korea someday. So we believe there are so many hidden places for these kind of WMDs. It'll take many more years, but kind of quick inspection of this kind. So we are getting a very good idea how we're going to stop all these nuclear facilities, both reported and unreported, in a relatively short period of time. So we have the technology and we have the willingness to do that, but depending on how North Korea will respond to these requests from the outside world. So it'll take a long time, but also we want to keep kind of hopeful that this kind of process can be shortened so that we can develop our good relations with North and South Korea, and also the normal relations between Washington and Pyongyang. This is definitely important, yes.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, what are your hopes for the Inter-Korean Summit that's taking place today? Your hopes for the Inter-Korean Summit?
Well, first of all, symbolism is important, even if I'm somewhat sarcastic sometimes, slightly, but symbolism is important, because without a kind of good environment, we cannot hope that the subsequent events, which are going to matter much more, will succeed. So, well, I hope that North Korean side will basically finally make a public commitment to denuclearization. I understand it's a symbolism. I understand it probably does not matter for much, but it's a necessary lip service to be paid before the beginning of more serious talk. I also hope that there will be some statements about the end of hostilities. Once again, it's largely symbolical, but it's still useful. And otherwise, well, symbolism and, of course, meeting of the divided families, because members of the divided families are largely in their 80s by now, and another 5 or 10 years there will be nobody to meet in both Koreas. So let's hope it will be somehow solved, and maybe some other additional issues.
Yeah, going back to the politics are all about symbolism and impressions, because actually instead of the reality, I don't know whether it is a reality, because it's all kind of perspectives and impressions. So this is leave a very good impression that we are finally agreed to meet each other and talking about the non-proliferation of North Korean WMDs. This is highly symbolic, but also it paved the way to eventual implementation, step by step, of realizing this kind of denuclearization process. This is just a new start for a long process. Even though both the leaders and also Mr. Trump really wants a quick and all of a sudden type of kind of resolution to this matter. But I think his remarks is highly symbolic, because the leaders always make this kind of symbolic gestures rather than the detailed, kind of process, because this is the role of the cabinet ministers and the working level officials. So I think for a short day like this, just less than 10 hours, if we agree to the very kind of broad idea that North Korea will make a kind of final commitment to denuclearization, and this will be a big success for our leaders. So we should keep our expectation not too high, reasonably high, but we should remain very hopeful. Yes.
Okay, so that's where we'll leave our discussions today. Thank you for your insights.